Hey, what's up guys? My name is StevieWunderKid and welcome back to another Fast and Furious car replica build here in GTA 5. In this video we're going to be recreating Leon's 1995 Nissan Skyline R33 GT-R that he owned and drove in the original Fast and Furious movie, otherwise known as the Big Bird. This car was a crazy historical car. A lot of work was done to this thing. It was originally used as an HKS demo car. It was drag raced for a little bit. It was used by Reese Millen in the Pikes Peak Hill Climb, the exact same car by the way. And then the same car was eventually repurposed for use in the original Fast and Furious movie. After it made its appearance in the movie, which is albeit pretty minor, which kind of sucks, but after it appeared in the movie, it traded ownership, it was raced a lot, and then eventually, unfortunately, it was seized by the authorities and crushed, according to Craig Lieberman. This car had an amazing history, a lot of ups, a lot of downs, but today we're going to try to do as much justice that we can to this car in GTA 5. I will have a link to Craig Lieberman's video talking about the history of this car, so yeah, definitely go and check that video out. Anyways, we're going to get started with this replica build. Obviously for this build, if you couldn't already tell, we are going to be using the Annis Elegy Retro Custom. Now this car, you'll need to buy the original Annis Elegy RH8 first. You can pick that up either off of the Legendary Motorsport or Benny's website, and then you're going to need to take it to Benny's and do the upgrade to the Elegy Retro Custom. That's around $900,000. And then after all the aesthetic modifications that we'll be covering in this video, you're looking at a total cost of around $1.3 to $1.4 million. So pretty hefty cost, but I think it's pretty well worth it. There's a lot of stuff we're going to do to this thing, and obviously it has the livery to match, so yeah, let's jump right into it. Alright, so moving right in, we have bumpers. First off, for the front bumper here, we're going to leave the nice stock front bumper, as you guys can see there. Same thing for the rear bumper, we're just going to leave the stock rear bumper on there. And the next step for bumper accessories, first off for bumper meshes, we're going to remove the bumper mesh up front here so that way we can see that massive intercooler up front. So that's done. And then for the intercoolers themselves, I've seen some builds just leave it stock, but I think the Monster intercooler is actually a slightly better match because the body of the intercooler itself is actually slightly narrower, so you can see a little bit more of the side, like the end tanks on it, and also the fins are a lot bigger, and I think overall the Monster intercooler just looks a lot closer to the actual intercooler that was used on the car in the movie. So Monster intercooler up front there. Moving back out, next up we have the chassis. First off, for headlight trim, we're not going to run any. For the most part, the car's exterior was mainly stock, which makes it nice and simple for us. But yeah, headlight trim, none. For the doors, doors are stock once again. And then for the fenders are also completely stock. Next up, we have the engine. So first off for the engine block here, now the car actually had a valve cover that was actually painted wrinkle black. And unfortunately, we can't get that look here in GTA 5, but the closest that we can get to having kind of a black valve cover is the carbon valve cover. Although obviously the texture is a bit different, the color is there, and it also adds a little bit more detail to the engine bay. The normal engine model is very bland, and to make it look like a little bit more dressed up, and it also kind of makes sense because this car had a fully kitted out engine. It was fully built. It had an insane nitrous setup and everything like that. So we can obviously add a bit of detail there and also get it closer to the actual color of the valve covers by running the carbon. So carbon valve covers there, and then also the cam belt cover is also going to be carbon too. There's no exposed cam gears or anything. It's all going to be one solid carbon color. Then for the strut brace, in reality the strut brace in the car was actually red, and then it had some, I guess, black heat tape over it or something like that. We really can't get that look in GTA 5, so I just ran the carbon strut brace to get it kind of close and to kind of make it a succinct match with the rest of the other details in the engine bay. So carbon strut brace there. Performance mods and stuff like that, obviously I'm not going to go over, that's up to you. Next up for the exhaust here, we're going to run the big bore exhaust to match the look of the massive HKS cannon that was strapped to the back of this car. So big bore exhaust, easy enough. Next up for the grille, we're just going to leave the stock grille. Next up for the hood, first off for hood accessories, there are none. Again, the majority of this car was stock on the outside, which is really nice. So yeah, no hood accessories as well as the stock hood there, so that's all good. Next up for the horn, that's down to you. Next up in the interior, we have the trim. So first off for the interior trim, the trim design, we're just going to leave it stock. There's no sun strip on this car, really easy there. Trim color as well. For this I ran the racing blue, so this is going to color the seats as well as the door panels blue. After doing a lot of digging and looking through Craig Lieberman's video on this car, you can see in one very pixelated video, you can see this car on the dyno, and you can see that it does have blue door panels. There was a generally blue theme going on in the interior of this car that we'll revisit in a little bit, but yeah, the trim color, you should run a racing blue there. Next up, we have the dash, and for this, we're just going to leave the stock dash, as you guys can see. Next up, we have the dials, and for this, we're going to run the pod-mounted tachometer, as you guys can see there. It's also got the boost gauge, which is permanently broken, which kind of sucks, but that's probably the closest match you're going to get to the gauges that were actually installed in the car in the movie. Next up for the doors, we're going to leave the stock doors. Next up for the seats here, we're going to run the sports seats. In reality, the car in the movie had Sparco Evo seats that had little cutouts for harnesses, but they were entirely black. Unfortunately, because we've set the trim color to a blue, if you run any of those seats that do have harnesses, it paints the entire seat blue, which I don't think looks very good. And if you take a look at the car and some of the close-up shots in the movie, you can see that Leon's not wearing any harnesses at all. So to kind of emulate that look, I think the sports seats are the way to go. You've got the black on the outside, and then the center portion is blue, which kind of makes sense, and it kind of syncs up with the blue theme of the interior of this car. And I think the styling of the seats is pretty spot on as well, so I think the sports seats are the way to go here. Although not perfect, they're the best that we can get right now. Next up for the steering wheels, this was also something that was extremely hard to see in some of the very pixelated videos of this car on the dyno, but a lot of the default wheels that I resort to in these Fast and Furious builds is the Apex Clubman wheel, because it looks very close to the aftermarket wheels that were installed on a lot of these cars, plus it has the nitrous buttons. In reality, the wheel in Leon's R33 in the movie looks a little bit different than this. Roughly the style is the same. It's hard to get a really close match in GTA 5. Another match that might work is the Sprint Professional, because it's got like metal spokes there as opposed to like the painted spokes, but I think that's even a little bit of a stretch there. So to keep it clean and to have the nitrous buttons as well, I think the Apex Clubman is the way to go. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of a better match there that you can get. So steering wheels, that's done. Next up for the light color, I just changed this to a frost white just to brighten up the gauges a little bit there. Nothing too serious, but now they're a little bit more visible, which is nice when you're driving. Next up for the roll cage, I ran the Dash Dodger cage. The car in the movie had a blue roll cage, again kind of fitting in with the theme of the blue in the interior of this car. However, we cannot achieve that detail here in GTA 5, so we're gonna have to bite the bullet and leave the cage yellow. I know it kind of sucks. Some people have done like a padded cage which has the blue padding. I think that's a little bit overkill, and I think you're kind of grasping at straws at that point. If you wanted to do the padded Dash Dodger cage, you could, but I just recommend running the normal Dash Dodger cage, although the color doesn't match. But yeah, this has the exposed bars in the interior. They're not like integrated into the pillar, as you guys can see there. So to kind of keep with the style of the cage that was actually in the car, the Dash Dodger is the way to go. There's a little bit less bracing in the back there, and overall the styling matches up pretty well, so this I think is the best way to go. So that's all good there. The interior is done. Next up for the lights here, for the headlights, we're gonna just leave them stock, as you guys can see. And then in addition to that, this car did not have any neons at all, so we're just gonna leave those off. So that's all good. Next up we have the livery, and obviously we're gonna run the Not Tonight Pizza Boy livery as a reference to Leon's line that he says to the pizza guy that shows up at the scene of the street race. Obviously a very clear reference to Fast and Furious, so definitely choose this livery, and that's all done. Next up we have the plates, and for this the plate holder up front, we're gonna remove it because if you look at the car in the movie, it didn't have a front plate, so just remove it up front. And then for the license plate in the rear, you're gonna want to leave the default blue and white 2 plate to obviously match the aesthetic of a California plate. And whenever the iFruit app works, or whenever Rockstar adds the feature that allows us to change the plates again, if you want to recreate the plate number for this car, it is 4IKQ331. So whenever you have access to that, feel free to change that up, but the blue and white 2 plate is the way to go. Next up for the respray, this is actually really simple, which is nice. So for the primary color, we're going to run a classic race yellow. Now a lot of builds that I've seen actually do a classic yellow, just a normal yellow. I think this is a little bit too orange, and I think this is kind of a misconception because of how warm the color grading is in the actual Fast and Furious movie. Because of the way that the movie was filmed, or the way that it was color graded after the fact, a lot of the colors look way warmer than they actually were in real life. And if you look at a picture of Leon's R33 when it's not in the movie, when it's just in its normal form, not on screen, it is more of a race yellow in my opinion, so that's why I chose it for the primary color. So classic race yellow there, no metallic, no nothing, just a normal classic shade. Classic race yellow yellow for the primary as well as the secondary, as you guys can see there. Really simple paint scheme, and I think this is the most authentic match you're going to get. So that's all handled. Next up for the trim color here, we actually covered this a little bit earlier on in the video, but once again we're going to do a racing blue to kind of give the little blue theme on the interior there. Moving back out, next up we have the roof accessories here. We're going to leave them off. Next up for the roof itself, we're just going to leave it stock. No roof spoilers, no vortex generators or anything like that. Nice and clean. Next up we have the skirts, and for this we're going to leave the stock skirts. And then next up we have the spoiler, and for this we're going to run the classic RS wing to match the kind of OEM styled R33 GT-R wing as well. Nice and clean. Next up for the suspension here, we're just going to leave the suspension stock because the car in the movie was fairly high off the ground and it had a decent amount of wheel gap. Already the Elegy Retro Custom is pretty low to the ground and doesn't have much wheel gap at all, but I think to be as close as possible to the stance of the car in the movie, just leave it stock, don't lower it any. Transmission, turbo, that's up to you. Next up we have the wheels, and for this there's two wheels that'll work, and they're actually the exact same set of wheels, just in different categories. So first off in wheel type here, we're going to go into the sports category and we're going to go to chrome rims because we want that chrome aesthetic, and we're going to go down to the Dash VIP rims here. So the Dash VIP rims in chrome, as you guys can see, is the closest match you can get to the Work VSXX rims that were on the car in the movie. Although they do have a little bit more of a dish than the wheels that are on the car, the style of the spokes themselves as well as the bolted faces, pretty much like the 2 or 3 piece rim style, is the closest match you're going to get. So Dash VIP rims in chrome, either in the sports category, or if for whatever reason you have one of these sets of wheels unlocked for free, maybe if you played enough races you actually can unlock all of these rims for free. But if you have access to SUV wheels in chrome, you can also get the exact same Dash VIP wheels. I don't know why they're the exact same wheel, just in different classes, but either way you guys have two different options there to get the Dash VIP rims in chrome, and that's definitely going to be your best match. So kind of pick and choose, I guess. It doesn't really matter all that much at the end of the day. For the wheel color, obviously we're not going to change that because they're chrome. For the tires here, the tire design is just going to stay stock. Tire enhancements, that's up to you. Tire smoke, we're just going to leave the default white. And last but not least, here in the windows section, we're going to run a limo tint, as you guys can see, to get these windows as blacked out as we possibly can. Obviously Leon's car in the movie did have very dark tints, so I think the limo tint is probably the best match. If you wanted to go a little bit lighter, maybe you could do the dark smoke, but I think limo tint is probably a little bit closer at the end of the day. So that is all handled there. So yeah, boys, that is pretty much everything you'll need to recreate Leon's Nissan Skyline R33. Had a crazy story. I wish this car had a little bit more presence in the movie, but nonetheless, I'm glad that we're able to kind of immortalize this car here in GTA 5. So hope you guys enjoyed this build. Hope you guys found this helpful. Feel free to leave any other recommendations for car builds you'd like to see me do in the future. And with that said, guys, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.